happening right now. DiJonai Carrington is looking around the room like, oh my God, I've never been in this much fire. I mean, it's getting so bad that now her endorsements are potentially about to pull out on representing DiJonai Carrington. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the tribe, like the video, please hype the video, because we only get just a little bit of high points over here, man. But with all of that being said,
there are games that people forget by the next morning. Scores fade, highlights scroll past, and life moves on. And then there are nights that completely rewrite the conversation around an entire sport. August 8th, 2026 was one of those nights. One game, one ejection, one tweet, one reverse suspension, and a head coach whose post-game press conference somehow managed to make everything dramatically worse. By the time the final buzzer sounded on the Indiana Fever versus Chicago Sky matchup, the WNBA wasn't just trending on social media, it was engulfed in the kind of multi-layered chaos that front offices have nightmares about. A superstar's entire season hung in the balance over a referee collision. A multi-million-dollar brand deal was reportedly being torn apart behind closed doors, and the player who started it all decided that the best place to fight back wasn't the basketball court. It was her phone. If you think you already know this story, you don't, not even close. The first quarter of any regular season game usually has a certain rhythm to it. Teams feeling each other out, coaches making early adjustments, players settling into the pace. But from the opening tip of Indiana versus Chicago, it was clear this was not going to be one of those calm, methodical nights. The physicality was turned up to a level that made even seasoned observers uncomfortable. Every screen was harder than necessary. Every drive into the paint was met with contact that pushed right up against the line of what the refs were willing to swallow. The tension in that arena was thick enough to cut through. Then it happened. Sophie Cunningham gets the ball in transition and she is gone. Open floor, nothing but daylight between her and an easy layup. From behind, DiJonai Carrington reads the play and comes flying in at full speed, desperate to make something happen, to disrupt the bucket before it goes up. The momentum behind her is enormous, and instead of getting a clean strip or a disciplined block attempt, Carrington's arm comes crashing down directly across Cunningham's head and neck area with devastating force. The contact is violent. Cunningham's body absorbs the full impact of the blow, and she goes straight down onto the hardwood. Hard. The basketball still somehow finds the bottom of the net as the crowd goes completely silent for half a second and then absolutely erupts. Cunningham is back on her feet almost immediately, and she is not okay with what just happened. She spins around and charges directly at Carrington, shoving her with both hands. Teammates from both sides pour onto the floor instantly, pulling bodies apart, trying to prevent this from escalating beyond what it already is. The officials are blowing whistles and screaming for order, but the energy in that building has completely shifted. This is no longer a basketball game. It is a confrontation. The officials huddle, exchange words, and make the only call they can reasonably make given what everyone in that building just witnessed. They go to the courtside monitor. Multiple angles, replays slow bound to a crawl. What they see is exactly what it looked like in real time. A wind-up, a full-force follow-through, and impact directly to the most dangerous area of a player's body. The contact was catastrophic enough that the severity alone removed any ambiguity from the equation. The refs officially upgrade the foul to a flagrant 2. DiJonai Carrington is ejected. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White acknowledged that the hard foul warranted the call. The decision was final, the hammer was dropped, and Carrington was sent to the locker room before the first quarter was even finished. Most people assumed that was where the story ended. A hard foul, a correct ruling, a player sent home early. But what Carrington did next turned a basketball incident into something the entire sports world could not look away from. She hadn't even changed out of her uniform yet. Minutes after being ejected, while the game was still being actively played on the court she had just been thrown out of, DiJonai Carrington picked up her phone and went straight to social media. No statement from her agent, no carefully worded press release, no waiting until the morning to gather her thoughts. She posted 2 words, just 2, white privilege, and she tagged the Indiana Fever directly.
Thinking skills. I know you study psychology. Furthermore, I'm the last thing from ignorant or asinine when it comes to speaking on white privilege. Do your research on that one. I actually went to school, one of the top universities, might I add, to educate myself on this exact subject. I would never use that term as a rhetorical weapon, knowing the historical and social weight it holds without having the proper.
The timeline exploded. Within minutes, the post was being screenshotted, shared, quote-tweeted, and reacted to by hundreds of thousands of people across every major platform. Sports commentators who had been breaking down the game footage pivoted immediately to discussing the post. Fans who had strong opinions about the flagrant foul call suddenly found themselves in an entirely different argument, one that had nothing to do with basketball rules and everything to do with the cultural tensions that have been simmering beneath the surface of the WNBA all season long. Because here is the context that matters. Sophie Cunningham had not exactly been a neutral figure heading into this game. She had been increasingly vocal throughout the season about her personal stances on issues well outside the lines of the court. Those positions had already made her a polarizing figure among certain fan bases and within certain corners of WNBA social media. The reaction to any story involving her name tended to split fast and split hard. Carrington's post didn't just add fuel to an existing fire. It took that fire and poured an entire tank of accelerant over it. What had started as a basketball game was now a full-blown cultural flashpoint, and the drama was only getting started. When DiJonai Carrington signed her multi-year ambassador deal with Reebok back in 2025, it was the kind of career moment that athletes dream about. Not just a check, a partnership, a signal to the industry that she was considered a marketable, high-profile face worth betting on. It represented financial security and commercial validation at a level that most professional athletes never reach. It was, by any measure, a defining moment in her career outside of basketball. Right now, that deal is under siege. Almost immediately after the tweet went viral, the pressure campaign against Reebok began. Thousands of fans, furious, organized, and loud, started flooding Reebok's social media pages and tagging the brand in post after post, demanding action. The messaging was direct and unambiguous: drop Carrington or face a boycott. These were not idle threats from a handful of accounts. The volume was significant enough that Reebok's social media presence became a battleground, with fans on both sides showing up to make their voices heard. But the pressure to terminate the contract was overwhelming and relentless. Reports began emerging that Reebok was seriously reconsidering the partnership. Multiple outlets suggested that the brand had morality clauses built into the contract, standard language in high-profile sponsorship deals that gives companies an exit ramp when a spokesperson's public conduct creates reputational risk. Whether or not those clauses would be formally invoked remained, as of this reporting, unconfirmed. Reebok had not issued an official public statement terminating the deal, but sources close to the situation suggested the conversation inside those executive offices was not comfortable.
Let's be clear about what we know and what we don't. The reports of Reebok pulling the deal are circulating, and they are being taken seriously by people tracking this situation closely. But until there is an official announcement from the brand itself, this remains a reported development, not a confirmed one. What is confirmed is that the pressure campaign is real, it is intense, and for a brand that has worked hard to build credibility in the women's sports space, the optics of this situation are genuinely complicated, regardless of which way they ultimately decide to go. For Carrington, the stakes could not be higher. This is not just about one sponsorship. It is about the signal it sends to every other brand evaluating whether to invest in her as a commercial partner going forward. One viral moment, one controversial post, and suddenly an entire business portfolio is in jeopardy. The financial consequences of this saga could follow her well beyond this season. But while that storm was raging across social media and inside corporate boardrooms, something else was happening on the court in Chicago, something that threatened to swallow the entire Fever organization whole. Fast forward to the third quarter. Caitlin Clark is doing what she does every single night, taking on suffocating defense, making plays under pressure, trying to will her team toward a win in a hostile environment. The Chicago Sky had been playing her physically all game, crowding her off screens, bumping her on cuts, making every possession feel like a grind. It is the reality of being the most watched, most discussed player in the league right now. Everyone is gunning for you. During one chaotic sequence, Clark is forced off the court and out of bounds by Chicago's Natasha Cloud. She is moving fast, momentum carrying her in a direction she can't fully control, and as she stumbles out of bounds, she makes incidental physical contact with one of the referees standing at the sideline. It is the kind of thing that happens dozens of times in a basketball season. A player flying out of bounds, a referee in the wrong place at the wrong moment, unintentional contact that nobody in the building would ordinarily think twice about. The whistle blows. The referee signals a technical foul on Caitlin Clark. For a full second, the Indiana bench looks like someone just announced a natural disaster, because this was not just any technical foul. This was Clark's 8th technical foul of the 2026 regular season. Under WNBA rules, the 8th technical foul triggers an automatic one-game suspension, mandatory, non-negotiable. The rules do not care about context, intent, or whether the contact was accidental. 8 technicals, you sit. The implications land immediately, and they land hard. The Indiana Fever's next game is against the New York Liberty, one of the toughest matchups in the entire league. The idea of walking into that game without Caitlin Clark was not just a competitive nightmare, it was a franchise-level crisis. The Indiana Fever's entire identity, their ratings, their ticket sales, their national profile, all of it is built around the gravitational pull of number 22. Losing her for even one game against a top-tier opponent had the potential to be a catastrophic blow. The fans in the arena responded the way fans respond when they believe a call is absolutely outrageous. They booed. Not politely, not for a few seconds before moving on. They booed with the kind of sustained, furious intensity that rattles press row and echoes in the hallways. The energy in that building swung violently from competitive tension to outright hostility directed at the officiating crew. Coach Stephanie White did not stay quiet. She marched toward the officials, arguing with visible fury that the contact was purely incidental, that when a player is hurtling out of bounds at full speed, the last thing that contact represents is a deliberate or disrespectful act toward a referee. Her argument was loud, pointed, and emotional enough that she picked up a technical foul of her own before the conversation was over. Social media, which had already been burning hot all game over the Carrington ejection and the viral tweet, now added a second layer of outrage to the pile. The narrative that the referees were specifically targeting Clark, that there was something systemic and intentional behind the way she was being officiated, gained enormous traction with stunning speed. Whether that narrative was fair or not almost didn't matter in the moment. The perception was spreading faster than any fact check could keep up with. There is a version of this moment where Caitlin Clark comes into the post-game press conference visibly upset, fires off emotional quotes, goes after the officials by name, and gives the story a fuel injection that carries it into a week-long media spectacle. That version would have been completely understandable given the circumstances, and it absolutely would have worked against her. Instead, she did the opposite. Clark walked into that press conference composed, measured, precise. She told reporters that the referee had claimed she ran into her, and then calmly stated that she had already watched the tape and would let the league office make the determination. She was explicit about what she saw: purely incidental contact, no hostile intent, no words exchanged, no screaming, no accusations, no emotional escalation. What she did instead was more powerful than any outburst could have been. She drew a line, she put it on the record, she made clear in calm and professional language that she expected the league to look at the evidence and make the correct call. It was the kind of statement that is impossible to dismiss or diminish because it contains no ammunition for anyone to fire back at her with. She was not complaining, she was demanding accountability in the most controlled, strategic way possible.
The WNBA front office pulled the broadcast tape. They went frame by frame through the collision. They reviewed every angle available to them. And just hours after that post-game press conference, the league made an announcement that nobody could have fully predicted in the chaos of the game itself. The technical foul was officially rescinded. The suspension was canceled. Caitlin Clark would be available to play against the New York Liberty. In practical terms, this was unprecedented. A player's technical foul getting officially walked back by the league office hours after the game based on tape review. That doesn't happen constantly. It sent a signal about the pressure the WNBA was operating under, about how closely every single call involving Clark is being scrutinized by millions of people, and about the institutional accountability that can be forced when a player handles their moment correctly. Clark hadn't just won the argument, she had made the league prove it was capable of correcting its own mistakes. That is a different kind of power entirely.
While Caitlin Clark was busy turning a crisis into a masterclass in professionalism, her head coach was walking headfirst into a controversy of her own making. Stephanie White's post-game comments were the kind of thing that sounds reasonable in isolation and becomes a disaster the moment the full context surrounds it. Rather than directly and forcefully defending her players, specifically Clark and Cunningham, who had both been at the center of the night's most dramatic and troubling moments, White leaned into language about outside forces trying to divide the locker room, about people looking to create challenges for the team, about keeping the main thing the main thing. It was carefully worded, it was conflict-averse, and to a significant portion of the audience watching, it read as a coach protecting herself from controversy rather than standing up for the players on her roster. The response was immediate, and it was brutal. Critics pointed out what they saw as a glaring inconsistency, that White had found ways to contextualize the actions of Carrington and others throughout the season, while appearing to minimize or sidestep the experiences of Clark and Cunningham. Fans who had already been frustrated with the league's handling of the physical play directed at Clark all season long saw White's post-game comments as the final confirmation of something they had been saying for months. The pile-on was relentless. Media personalities, former players, and ordinary fans alike called out what they characterized as a fundamental failure of leadership. A coach's primary obligation, above strategy, above public relations, above managing relationships with other franchises and their players, is to stand in front of the camera and make it crystal clear that she has her players' backs, that she sees what happened, that she is not okay with it, that there will be accountability. When that moment came, critics argued White flinched. And in the sports media environment of 2026, flinching on camera is permanent. It lives on in clips and highlights and comment sections indefinitely. White's defenders argued that she was trying to maintain team cohesion in a charged environment, that publicly escalating the racial and cultural dimensions of the story was not in anyone's interest, and that her job is to manage a locker room, not to perform outrage for a social media audience. That is a legitimate perspective. But in a moment when her players were watching, when the fan base was watching, when the entire sports world was watching, the optics of what she chose to say and what she chose to leave out created a wound that will take significant time to heal, if it heals at all. The press conference became a second controversy inside the first one, and for a team trying to stay focused on basketball in the middle of an absolutely chaotic night, it was the last thing the Indiana Fever organization needed. Here is the part of this story that gets lost in all the noise, and it might be the most important part of all. While DiJonai Carrington was fighting to protect her brand deals online, while Stephanie White was watching her press conference get dissected and criticized on every platform imaginable, while WNBA executives were huddled in rooms reviewing tape and making decisions about what to rescind, Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham were playing basketball. The Indiana Fever won that game 90-86. Caitlin Clark finished with 26 points and 11 assists. In one of the most emotionally chaotic, externally dramatic, high-stakes environments a player could possibly be asked to perform in, she delivered. She put up numbers that would be impressive in a controlled, clean, stress-free situation, And she did it in a game that had everything working against her team from the first quarter on. There is a message in that, and it is not subtle. Clark has consistently responded to the controversy and the scrutiny and the physical play and the media circus by simply refusing to let any of it affect what she does on the floor. While other storylines swirl around her, she locks in. While debates rage about whether she is getting fair treatment from officials, she goes out and makes the argument irrelevant through performance. It is a level of mental compartmentalization that is genuinely rare, and it is a significant part of why her profile continues to grow regardless of what any given news cycle throws at her. The WNBA as a franchise is breaking viewership records night after night. The league's national television numbers are at levels that would have seemed almost impossible just a few years ago. That growth is directly tied to the kind of compelling, dramatic, high-intensity story that the 2026 season has become, but it is also creating pressures and scrutiny that the WNBA's institutional structures are visibly struggling to handle. The officiating review process, the handling of player conduct on social media, the management of physical play that has repeatedly crossed dangerous lines, all of it is being watched, judged, and discussed by millions who previously paid little or no attention to the league. The WNBA has always had talented players, compelling basketball, and stories worth telling. What's new is the magnitude of the spotlight. And nights like August 8th make it abundantly clear that not everyone inside the league is ready for what that spotlight demands. Step back from the individual moments, the flagrant foul, the tweet, the technical, the reversal, the press conference, and look at the entire night. What you see is a league caught between two versions of itself. One version is the polished, growing, nationally relevant property that is shattering records and attracting fans by the millions. The other version is an institution with internal tensions, officiating inconsistencies, conduct management problems, and cultural fault lines that a single game can tear wide open. DiJonai Carrington made a basketball mistake and then made a much more consequential personal mistake. Her ejection was justified. Her social media post, regardless of how you interpret her motivations, created consequences that extend well beyond this game, this season, and this controversy. The reported collapse of her Reebok deal, if confirmed, will be studied as a case study in how quickly one decision made in an emotional moment can dismantle years of professional relationship building. Caitlin Clark showed something different. She showed that in the highest pressure moments, the players who control their response control the narrative. She did not just survive August 8th. She came out of it with her suspension reversed, her performance on the scoreboard validated, and her reputation as the league's most important and most composed figure intact. That is not luck, that is discipline under fire. And Stephanie White now faces a serious reckoning about what kind of leader she wants to be publicly perceived as. The basketball decisions she makes, the plays she draws up, the adjustments she makes at halftime, none of that matters to a fan base if they believe their players are not being defended. She has a genuine opportunity to address that perception head-on. Whether she takes it will say everything about her leadership. The WNBA front office, for its part, made the right call in rescinding Clark's technical foul, but the fact that it required this level of public pressure to prompt that review is its own kind of indictment. The league's officiating on August 8th was inconsistent enough to hand critics ammunition they will be using for months. The league's standards around physical play, player conduct, and accountability need to be tightened and made visible, not just enforced quietly behind closed doors after the internet demands it. This was one game, one night, 86 minutes of basketball that generated enough controversy, enough drama, enough genuine sporting significance to fill a month's worth of news cycles. The Indiana Fever won, The final score was 90-86, but the real scoreboard, the one tracking trust, credibility, accountability, and the long-term health of the league, is still very much being updated. The WNBA has never had a bigger stage. Nights like this one are both proof of how far the league has come and a warning about how much further it still needs to go. When a single tweet from a locker room can threaten a multi-million-dollar sponsorship deal, when a routine referee collision can trigger a national conversation about bias, and when a head coach's measured choice of words becomes the biggest controversy of the night, the game is no longer just a game. It is a cultural event, and cultural events demand a higher standard of everyone involved. The question now is whether the WNBA rises to meet it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Reebok made the right call if they officially pull Carrington's deal? Was the league's decision to rescind Clark's technical foul the right one, or does it set a precedent that opens a door they're not ready for? And what does Stephanie White need to do next to rebuild trust with a fan base that is watching her every move? Let's talk about it. And if you want more breakdowns like this one, the real story behind the headlines, not just the surface level takes, you already know what to do.